Welcome to Buying Sandlot. Today, we're joined by Nina Johnson, Banana Ball Chief of Staff for the Savannah Bananas and a former Little League International exec. We dive into how the Savannah Bananas are approaching youth camps and tournaments, what a future Banana Ball Youth League could look like, the challenges facing community-based programs, and how parents a lot of times shape sports decision-making. But before we get into the episode, we want to thank Event Connect for sponsoring the show. If you're an operator or tournament director, you know tournament weekends have become mini supply chains. Teams register, rosters change, schedules shift, hotels fill, and parents scramble. Too many events still run things on spreadsheets, portals, and last-minute calls. That's where Event Connect comes in. They centralize the weekend workflow and handle things like registration, rostering, payments, lodging, and real-time reporting. 20 organizers can run end-to-end on Event Connect or integrate the systems they already use with no rip and replace required. Whatever you choose, the data lands in one place so operators aren't stitching together reports from multiple tools. But that's not all. Their House and Connect feature embeds hotel bookings directly into checkout, capturing rooms at peak intent instead of sending families to a separate portal later. And results can be up to 30% more room night reservations and 24% savings on team hotel costs. You need more proof? Event Connect powers 5,000 events and connects 30,000 hotels across 800 destinations annually. Learn more at how Event Connect can help power your tournament at eventconnectsports.com. Now, let's get into the interview. Nina Johnson, Banana Ball Chief of Staff for the Savannah Bananas. Thank you for joining Buying Sandlot today. I'm sure people will be able to hear in the background a lot of campers because you lead youth sports and community engagement initiatives, particularly in the Banana Ball youth camps and pop-up camps over there at the Savannah Bananas. Just first question, we see a lot of sports entertainment brands like NFL Flag or the Harlem Globetrotters. They build around youth camps and clinics. I know the stated goal for you guys is to change youth sports. Can you talk about what the experience has been like and tell us more about the vision behind it?
Oh, definitely. And yes, we have a youth camp, 200 campers out in Grayson Stadium right now. So you may hear some celebrating and some maybe even home runs being hit off the building that I'm in, which is just in the outfield. So, but we're happy to have it. It's organized chaos always here in Bananaland, and we wouldn't have it any other way. So regarding the youth programming that we do here, we always endeavor to keep the main thing, and we think we have a pretty good thing going with what we're doing with Banana Ball. But, there is an interest for kids to get involved in Banana Ball. And so just like we're continuing to develop this sport that we're in, we're also trying to figure out what our role is in the youth space. And we know that we have people that are interested in it. We know that our players are interested in it. So we've tried a couple of different things over the years and we're still navigating it. So we've been doing camps here in Savannah for a number of years. They're led by a couple of our players of the Bananas, Bill Leroy and Kyle Luigs. They just started doing it for a little extra money and to have fun. And so it's evolved into something. And then we kind of dipped our toes in the tournament space back in 2024 on one of our stops in Cleveland, Ohio on the Banana Ball World Tour. We ran a youth tournament. We worked with athletics to help us run that tournament. I wasn't involved at that time, but it was a great event and we were able to impact some kids. But like we always do, we said, I think we can do this a little bit better if we do it ourselves. So last year we ran a tournament here in Savannah. I wasn't officially employed by the Bananas at that time, but I jumped on and helped just in kind of a tournament director capacity. And we had 720 kids from all over the country here in Savannah. It was a great event. However, if you've ever spent much time here in the Southeast in July, you know that we have some storms almost every afternoon. And so the way that event was structured, it was intended to be kind of a learn Banana Ball and then also participate in tournament games. And oftentimes as parents taste a little bit of that competitiveness, kind of the Banana Ball spirit goes out the window. So we had to rearrange some schedules because of the weather, and parents were upset that we had to, maybe put the competitive part of the tournament aside to really salvage what was left. And so when I came on board, and we really kind of looked at what youth programming meant to us and where we wanted to be, still kind of keeping the main thing, we decided to start to do some of these pop-up camps, it just in an attempt to reach more people and have more kids experience what Banana Ball was. So this year, as part of our world tour, we're doing 12 pop-up camps. We've completed 7 of those, 5 more to go. And then we're also doing what we call a Banana Ball U Savannah experience here in Savannah at the end of July and August. And really, our intention at this point is just to get as many kids playing as possible. We know that there are people that are running Banana Ball tournaments, and we actually go after those folks because we're very protective of our brand. And the reason is that people will go to these tournaments, they're promised tickets or appearances by our players, and then when that doesn't happen, then they're mad and they reach out to us. And so, we want to make sure that the experience that people are having when they think of Banana Ball, when they think of Fans First Entertainment, is a consistent one. It lives up to our expectations. And at this time, the only way that we can really do that is if we're running these events ourselves. So right now we're in pop-up camps, we're running this experience, and then we're just continuing to take direction from Jesse in how he envisions our role in community programming. And the main thing is he just wants as many kids playing Banana Ball as possible.
So Nina, I mean, it sounds like I think Jesse put out a video, I want to say late last year or early this year, that I think was on your socials, talking about the opportunity and changing youth sports in general. And I think today you guys, as you outlined, you're doing the experience, you're doing the pop-up camps. But that certainly, if I'm kind of reading between the lines, sounds like a V1 of maybe what the overall vision would be. How much more of the vision are you willing to share, or how much further can you guys go beyond, I don't want to say just pop-up camps, but beyond pop-up camps and kind of individual, solitary weekend experiences here and there? Like how grand can this get?
Yeah, so that video that Jesse shared was a meeting with the players as we started the 2026 season, and one of our players asked the question, "What's the vision for youth programming?" And Jesse shared the vision, and it's important to everyone in the organization, our players in particular, that we're creating the next generation of Banana Ball players. And I think at this time, while we continue to evaluate the youth landscape and determine what our role is in that landscape, it will continue to evolve. And so I think as Jesse has shared with us, and I'll go back to it again, getting as many kids playing as possible. And kind of Jesse's vision is, this is what I want. You guys figure it out from there. And I think, what needs to happen is that, and I talked about this in my previous role where I worked for Little League Baseball, is that you have all of these entities that are talking about how to fix youth sports. And the Spider-Man meme where everybody's kind of pointing fingers at each other as to why something's broken. That's youth sports, right? You have parents saying, well, we do this because you tell us we have to. You have administrators and coaches saying, we do it because, and all these fingers are pointing. And we really need to get everybody moving in the same direction. And I think some of that is just deprogramming people and to think about youth sports in a different way. And we have all the data, and we talk to kids and we ask them what they want, and then they tell us, and then we as adults say, I don't think that's really what you want. You want this, right? And kids just want to have fun, and we want them in Banana Ball to do a couple of things. We obviously want to create some longevity in the sport, and that's introducing them to the sport early, creating those Banana Ball players, evolving our game to bigger and better ways. And the way to do that is to get different people involved. So we have that on our minds. Secondly, we want people to know that it's okay to fail. And I think in youth sports, so often that's something that kids are so afraid to do because they're so programmed, they're so joysticked to do things a certain way. So when we're doing our camps, the one thing that you'll see is that, kids will come in and some of them are crazy and, they're doing all the things. And then some kids are a little more reserved, and we just want them to feel comfortable. We want them to feel comfortable looking silly. They don't look silly. They just think they look silly. So doing different things, trying trick plays, failing. So whether they're trying to catch a ball behind the back, whether they're trying to field it between their legs, whether they're dressed in a different way. And once they're comfortable and, they're trying new things, they become more athletic. So as we continue to have kids, specializing earlier and earlier, they're not as good of athletes because they're not playing different sports. But in our sport, it's not just the same motions over and over again. You see our guys on the field doing backflips, they're doing spin catches, they're doing cartwheels, all of these things that are different, that are actually, they're better athletes as a result of those things. So while we don't, and we get that question a lot. So are you gonna, you're gonna try to start a banana ball league? Is it just gonna be camps? Is it just gonna be clinics? And I think at this point we haven't ruled anything out. I think, we'll continue to really try to figure out what our role is in this landscape. And again, we don't want to get away from the fact that the main thing is the main thing. And so we'll continue to kind of test some of these things to see what works for us, to see, where we can get some energy and where we can get some momentum. And then from there, based on the vision and what we're seeing and what people want, I think we'll start to carve out what our role is in the youth space.
One of the things we see, just kind of covering everything going on in youth sports, is this pretty wide open opportunity that I think plays into your guys' hands, which is we call it like professionalized rec, which is maybe not the perfect term for what you're trying to do, but on one hand you have kind of these elite circuits of kids who are really purpose driven at whatever the next level is for them. And then you have kind of the community run organizations, which can be really good, but kids, tend to kind of age out, especially in baseball when the field gets bigger, right? And we see a lot of ideas and concepts in youth sports where you see someone started this company called Middle School Matchup in Texas, and they're a franchise and they allow kids to play in their hometown, and it's a couple of tournaments a year, and it's very low stakes, and it's for fun. And it feels like the Bananas, can really sort of carve out that niche where you can create a professionalized structure, well-run organizations, whether it's camps, leagues, or tournaments, um, while at the same time prioritizing fun participation and keeping kids playing, which sounds like it's your goal. So maybe talk a little bit about the opportunity you guys see kind of in that space. And then maybe just like some of the broader issues you see in youth baseball in general that you can where you can kind of fill that vacuum, I guess.
Yeah, I think that structure is really, really important. And, I'm fortunate coming into this role, having almost 18 years working with Little League baseball and softball, who, are at the top of youth baseball and softball. But one of the things that we often talked about in my last role there is that while we had this kind of great framework for programming, the experience that each child had was dependent upon the volunteers locally running that program. And it was different from community to community. Even though we had this framework, there still needed to be some flexibility. And so the quality of the coaches in each league was directly related to the experience the kid had. The the amount of organization, the structure, the concessions, everything from start to finish really impacted that experience. And so as we think about Banana Ball, and you think about our games that we're playing now on the World Tour, people who attend those games, whether you're attending a Bananas and Firefighters game or whether you're attending a Coconuts and whoever they're playing, you pretty much know what you're going to expect. You're going to have an amazing time. The show is going to be a little bit different, but people know what to expect. They know it's going to be fans first. They know what they're going to expect. And so I think anything that we would endeavor to do in the youth space, we would want that same experience. And that's really the hardest thing when you're dealing with youth programming, because you're relying on those local people. You're deploying people to take whatever the experience is and make that great. And so what we're doing with the pop-up camps now, the reason that they're going so well is that they're run by our staff, our players, and our coaches show up. And so is it a heavy lift? It is right now for the small amount of kids we're impacting. But every one of the kids that is coming to our events walk away having had the best time of their life. And so anything that we do in that youth space, we want to make sure that we don't lose sight of that.
That was going to be my follow-up on kind of the model. I know you guys, sort of famously, control like your ticket stack, for example. In terms of operating, whether it's camps, leagues, tournaments, do you guys prefer to be that operator where everyone's a Bananas employee? Do you work with partners? I know like RCX works with NFL Flag, for example, and they've kind of licensed some of that. There's obviously franchise models that, some people undertake. Like, would you guys operate even if you got large scale, or would you seek to kind of work with partners?
Yeah, I think if you asked us that question today, we would really want as much control over the experience as possible. Because I think we've learned when we have outsourced things, it just hasn't worked well, because we have to rely on those other companies and their investors and their partners, and that often loses sight of the fan. And that's why we do so much in-house, is because we're able to keep our fans at the center of everything that we do. Anytime we've outsourced, I think maybe it hasn't been bad necessarily, but it's just not up to our expectation. And that's probably our biggest struggle with youth programming right now, is how we scale that with the staff that we have. We're just not set up right now with a youth staff necessarily to run those things. And so we're relying on our players and our coaches and those of us that, yeah, I'm the chief of staff for Banana Ball, but I'm also overseeing projects and youth programming. So I'm spinning so many plates, as is everybody in the organization right now, because we've scaled so quickly. And so as we've thought about what we're doing with youth programming, that's at the top of our mind is, how can we do this in-house without having to outsource? Because we know what happens in youth sports right now. Like it's what is it, up to a $40 billion industry right now?
I think that's definitely the low end, but yeah.
Yeah. And so you get out there and that money comes into it, and people lose sight of what's important, which is the kids and the experience. And so anything that we do in this space, that will always be our priority.
Is there any operators or companies that might not even be in the youth sports space that you guys internally talk about being like, okay, we've seen them scale a model and stuff, that might be a good launching pad? Is there anyone you guys have spoken about or thought about?
Yeah, you mentioned RCX Sports, and I'm a huge fan of RCX. Izel Reese, I think, is phenomenal. I was able to, sit on a panel with him previously, and my daughter played NFL flag, so I'm
just on the show last week too.
Yeah, and I know they're going through some things right now, so I'm a huge fan of his and what RCX Sports has done with flag. And then at Little League, we also work with RCX Sports when we ran some pitch hit and run sessions during the Little League World Series. So I'm a fan of his. And there are some other models out there, but I think, we know that what makes our event special is having players attend. So everybody's running, not everybody. There are Banana Ball events being run, rogue events being run, and the experiences are probably fine. They're going and they're doing trick plays and they're coloring it yellow, and they probably have some bananas there. But why people come to our events is because they know they're going to have interactions with the players. They know they're going to get to work with Coach Viro, and they're going to get to go work with Coach Bartman, who's also who came to us from USA Baseball and helps with youth programming, with Coach Gillum. So that's what pluses the experience for kids when they come to our events. And I just don't know how we'll be able to continue youth programming without kind of that experience that's there. Because if you think about Banana Ball games, if we just had a Banana Ball game and we said, okay, we're not going to do any autograph signing, we're not going to have any player interactions, you're not going to get to meet the players, I think we'd be talking about something very different. We'd be talking about a different product. And so what makes the events, what makes Banana Ball successful, what makes people love it, is knowing they're going to be able to engage and meet players, meet their heroes, meet their, these people that they look up to. And I think when we think about youth programming, we have to figure out how we can incorporate that into it. I don't know what that looks like just yet, but I think it's an important aspect of what we do.
So is the goal still 1 million participants, do you think? I think that was Jesse's original number when he released that video in the early.
Yeah, I think he still wants 1 million kids to be playing Banana Ball. And as I look at it, I want kids to play Banana Ball, but I don't want it just to be a one-time thing, right? Like I don't want kids to just go to one camp and that be their Banana Ball experience. I want them to have additional opportunities to continue to play Banana Ball where they fall in love with it, because we are creating a sport. We're not trying to compete with Major League Baseball. We're not trying to compete with traditional baseball. We're creating our own sport. And as we like to say here, we're building the plane as we're flying it. Or Jesse likes to say we're still in the first inning. So we're still figuring this out. And, as we think about getting more and more kids involved and creating future Banana Ball players, I think probably if we really thought about it, the hope is that we do eventually have a youth Banana Ball league. I don't know when that's going to happen or what that's going to look like. But if we're thinking of this as a different sport, we want that pipeline for kids where they started playing it young and they were able to continue playing it. And I don't think that replaces Little League or, travel ball or recreational sports. I think it just gives kids another option to try something a little bit different. And, the other thing that we talk about in Banana Ball is that I think a lot about, I don't know if you all watched Glee, when the athletes were also singers, right? And that wasn't something that people really thought about. So our players and even these kids I see at camps, I never feel less talented than when I'm around these players. Like, in addition to just baseball players, they all are so incredibly talented and you would never know about it. And I think sometimes in traditional sports, especially when we get into travel ball, and I have I have an 18-year-old daughter. She's in college now, but she played competitive softball through. And the one thing that I always had to remind her of is that you're not defined by your performance on the field. You're not defined as a softball player. You are so much more than that. And I think what we want people to understand in banana ball is, yes, they're out there playing banana ball, but they have so many other talents. Like, probably their skill on the field is the least amount of talent they have. They're all doing so many other things, and they're able to showcase that, through this platform. And I think we want that to be able to trickle down as kids are little and they get into travel ball and there's so much pressure on them and they don't think about doing anything else. We want them to be able to play this sport where they're having fun, but also utilize some of their other talents in it as well.
Do you anticipate? I'm just picturing, kind of the average travel or club baseball coach, hearing kids catching ball behind their back, right between their legs, and I think maybe you wouldn't position as being competitive with baseball, but I would imagine certainly you take the average 10-year-old and it's like, hey, you could play in this travel season or this travel tournament, or you can go do a weekend with the Bananas or play in a banana season. Like, I think you're going to pull lots of kids from traditional baseball. So, what do you kind of envision that mix being like? And like, do you guys hear feedback from kind of the hardened baseball person who's like, this isn't baseball, especially at the, I think they could probably accept that it's entertainment at the pro level in stadiums, but for kids, they're like, hey, now they're not learning. They're learning something other than the fundamentals, right? Like, well, how do you sort of see that friction with like existing baseball folks, I guess?
Yeah, great question. So when we ran the tournament in Savannah last year, probably the biggest portion of the feedback was that parents and kids shared with us, this was a really great break from our traditional travel schedule. Like, we were just able to come out and have fun. It was this great break. And we always end all of our camps when our coaches talk to the kids. They always say, look, when you go to your Little League practice, and you go to your travel practice, you listen to your coaches. You do what your coaches say, if they're telling you to focus. But then when you go home, you're practicing trick plays in the backyard. But, during your practices, you listen to your coaches. You do the things that they want you to do. And so, because we know there are the naysayers and there are the people that say it's not real baseball, and that's fine. Their opinions are fine, but I think we're continuing to prove ourselves that it's something that there's an interest in. There's people want to consume it. We're selling out major league stadiums when major league teams can't sell out their own stadiums. So we feel pretty good about the product that we've created, and we won't be deterred by those comments. But yeah, I mean, I think kids will continue to play because, right, the focus is from parents is still, we got to get that college scholarship and we have to make this team and we have to make that team. But we think that we're actually, through having them, again, become more athletic and trying trick plays, we're really creating better athletes. We're keeping kids playing longer to the point that they can actually figure it out. I know one of the things that, and I coached my kids when they played, one of the things that we talk about is we need to keep kids in the sport long enough to realize that they're actually good. I think kids are quitting the sport too early before they even develop their talent. I'm 45 years old, and if you took my kind of 12-year-old self from 1992 and transplanted me now, because I started late, like, I wouldn't even have played sports because I would have just been like, oh, I didn't start when I was 4. I'm too far behind. And so I think we just need to give kids an opportunity to keep playing sports long enough until they can figure out if it's really what they want to do, and not just get pushed out because they feel like they're already behind the 8 ball. And I think that's what we're trying to do with Banana Ball. Like, get kids in, keep them having fun until they figure out maybe they are a really good ball player and they want to play traditional baseball or maybe a basketball, whatever that might be. Because in Banana Ball, we incorporate other sports. You see, they're dribbling the ball. They're Sunshine Looters is kicking the ball, playing soccer with the baseball. And so we're really in the trick plays and what we're doing, incorporating some other sports as well. And, if kids are a talented soccer player and they decide they want to jump on the baseball field and, kick a ball from second base to first base to get an out, that's cool as well. So that's our interest, is just getting kids playing, making them fall in love with the sport, staying active, and then hopefully becoming either future banana ballers or just future fans of baseball and softball.
I completely agree, by the way. When I kind of asked that question about professionalized rec, it was that sort of pathway that I think we see just who we talk to, the opportunity, right? Like, you get kids who were shouldered out because they didn't join the travel or club team at 6, 8, or 10. And now they just there's no path for them in the sport. It becomes frustrating. So I think that feels a good middle ground. In terms of like operating it and you guys wanting to kind of, control the product, is there a route to acquire existing programs that maybe have the infrastructure, facilities, team, and then you can layer on the IP and the know-how of the Bananas on top of that? Is that a route you guys have thought about?
Yeah, that's not something that we've specifically discussed. I think, and anybody running youth baseball and softball programs will tell you that one of the hardest things is just the facility, right? And we even struggle with that with these pop-up camps, is finding, a facility where it can accommodate what we're looking to do. And so not owning our own facilities, and we have right now 6 professional teams playing on one stadium. And so we're always looking for space, and we understand those constraints. And so, at this point, anything that we do in the youth space, we're having to work with someone to either rent that facility from or provide that facility. And so I don't know that we've talked through any type of acquisition. I think we would just kind of see where this evolved to, depending on what we wanted to do. And Jesse's always talking about building Bananaland. So who knows, maybe there'll be a youth facility as part of Bananaland where we can run our own events.
And how do you guys think about balancing? I know accessibility is important for you guys, certainly on the ticket pricing side. You come from Little League, so you're well aware of this kind of ongoing topic in youth sports. How do you balance the accessibility and affordability? I was looking at kind of the prices for your existing pop-up camps or the full experience, which my kids are 10 and 7. They would love to attend, right? And the price points are reasonable. It looks like it's between $100 and $500, depending on the experience. Correct me if I'm wrong. How do you guys balance that as kind of a for-profit venture, but at the same time making sure you can reach as many kids as possible with your product? And thinking, I know Jesse thinks very long-term, from the interviews we've seen. Like, how do you think about developing long-term fans and balancing those two things?
Yeah, access is absolutely a priority. I think it should be everyone's priority in youth sports, is making sure that kids have access to the program, and whether that's through inexpensive equipment, whether it's just through being able to be in proximity of where a program is. And that's one of the reasons that we decided to do these pop-up camps, because only operating here in Savannah, it's not an easy place to get to. And we know we're so limited in who we could reach. And so the pop-up camps were able to get out to these other cities, reach kids that reach people that maybe weren't able to get tickets to a banana ball game. So they were able to interact with players and experience it. And then people that just aren't able to travel to Savannah. So, as we've expanded that, and these pop-up camps are across the country. We've gone from California to Chicago to Texas. So we're really trying to hit as many spots across the country as we can. And that's what we've done with our banana ball games as well. I think this year we're playing in 48 states. We're trying to play within 2 to 3 hours of everyone in America. So they have access to get to games. So that's incredibly important to us, not just with our Banana Ball World Tour, but with youth programming. And yeah, they're affordable. Pop-up camps are $100. The experience, which is a 4-day event, is I think $525. And so we want to make sure that it's something that people aren't priced out of. And and you also, not that we don't want to do things for free, but oftentimes when you offer things for free, people will sign up and then don't show up. So we need to be able to plan for these things as well. So while we'd love to do things for free, we'd like there just to be some kind of commitment as we're doing them. So access is a huge thing for us. And even like for banana ball equipment, you don't need a $500 bat to play in banana ball. You don't need, the sliding mitts, the oven mitts to be able to play banana ball. So any of these events that we do, we would make sure we're not pricing anybody out of it. And these events also, some of the kids that come to these events have never played baseball. So they're in their shorts and their sneakers. And that's okay too, because our hope is that they come to one banana ball event and they were like, that was really cool. I had so much fun and I want to keep playing. So scalability wise, I think, as we go forward, we'll continue to want to make sure that whatever we offer is for everybody. And that's always tough. We dealt with that in Little League a lot as well. It's when you try to offer it for everybody, sometimes you just don't do it well. And so I think whatever we do, we'll want to make sure that we're hitting as many kids as possible, that we're not eliminating, we're not creating barriers for people to enter to play our program. And that will always be our priority.
All right, stick with me on this next question. As we just talk about affordability and accessibility, how much do you guys think of the potential of these pop-up camps, maybe this youth sports league coming down a little bit? I don't want to say the Banana Ball Academy model, but kind of a feeder system. Do you guys ever think about being hey, I know 20 years down the line, what is Banana Ball then? Who knows? But a lot of these kids, in these youth sports camps, in these pop-up tournaments and stuff, retroactively, a small percentage become MLB baseball players. Do you ever guys think about that, like long term down the line of, these could potentially be banana ball players one day?
Yeah, I mean, our hope is that banana ball just is integrated into everything, right? That everyone has been touched by banana ball at some point in it, and whether it makes them future, athletes, or whether it just makes them think about things in a different way. Our goal really is to bring joy to as many people as possible. And when people leave any of our events, we just want them to be happy. We want them to walk away saying, that was so much fun. I've never had that much fun ever in my life. When can I come back and go to the next one? And even in our interactions with our fans, our customer service is a huge priority. We study Chick-fil-A, we study Amazon, we study Delta, we study all of those companies that prioritize customer service, fan experience, fan interaction. So our hope is that everybody at some point has some type of banana ball story, whether it means they're playing baseball or basketball or whatever, or that they're just approaching things differently because of the experience that they had with the Savannah Bananas and Fans First Entertainment.
Switching gears a little bit, you spent, I believe it was 18 years at Little League. I'd love to just kind of get your perspective on the changes you've seen in youth baseball, over the last 10, 20 years. And then maybe, what you kind of saw that kind of compelled you to take this opportunity with the Bananas, focusing on the youth side.
Yeah, I appreciate that question. I've been really fortunate to have a pretty cool jobs in my life. And I've been able to bring a unique perspective in that I played sports. I coached my kids in sports. I'm a parent in sports. I'm a professional in sports, and I'm just a fan. Right. So not many people are able to have, that perspective in the approach. And, I started in Little League as the assistant director. Actually, I worked for the YMCA. I ran sports leagues for a YMCA in New Jersey. And then I came in as the assistant director in the Central region in Indianapolis, moved into the director role, and then spent the last couple of years in strategy and program development. So the beginning of my career with Little League was compliance. And so while, the role was to offer support to the volunteers running Little League programs, it was also rules and regulations and compliance. That's almost counterintuitive to what youth sports should be. But also in Little League, we had that big carrot of the World Series. And so in order to make sure we had that path, there needed to be some structure. There needed to be as level of a playing field as possible. And one of the things that we often talked about at Little League was, we had the recreational, the community-based part of the program, which impacted the most kids, right? Tournament was a small number of kids. And we talked about whether or not sort of that the tournament, the rules and the restrictions and the structure that came from tournament, what was negatively impacting that community-based experience. Because you had just your like normal T-ballers and your kids that just wanted to play that were like, well, wait a second, like, why do I have to live here? I just want to play with my friends. And so there was always this like education and this like push and pull between the regular season experience and tournament. And I think over the course of my time with Little League, our focus really went away from kind of that hardcore compliance where we were, it's almost like, how can we get less kids to play just because of all the rules we had with boundaries, to thinking about things differently. And it's like, okay, how can we make the experience better? And as I moved into my role in strategy and program development, our three pillars were access, experience, and retention. So we went back to that access where, okay, we have boundaries and we understand there has to be some structure around these leagues because we have this tournament carrot, but like, how can we make sure more kids who want to play Little League actually have the opportunity and aren't just pushed out because they don't live in a certain area or their community decided not to offer it? So we started to create paths for those kids to be able to participate in Little League. And then experience, that was always the wild card because like I talked about earlier, we have this great program, right? We have the framework, but how it was implemented was really dependent upon the local volunteers that were running the program. And, every community was a little bit different. And Little League is a volunteer-based organization. So, you had some people that were more engaged, some people who weren't as engaged. And the experience that child, that family had was impacted only by those people running the program. So that was something that was a little bit out of our control. So we always struggled with that. And we had, we provided the resources, we provided the people, we provided the training, but whether or not they took advantage of that to make their program better was really up to them. So that was always a wild card. And then retention for us was that, we knew where we were losing at the points where we were losing. So taking a look at that structure and trying to understand better why people were leaving the program, where they were going, and why they weren't staying. And then that retention also went a little bit further to when kids aged out of our program, how could we still keep them involved, whether that was through coaching or umpiring, or maybe when they had kids, when they were looking for a program for their kids, that they were prioritizing Little League. So it was sort of creating this like life cycle of Little League. And so that's probably the biggest change that I saw at Little League, was going away from like, hey, we need to be heavy handed with compliance and think about how we can get more kids into the program. Because if we're so focused on this kind of compliance part, people are going to have other options, and they're going to find something else to do. So we shifted a little bit. And then also, during that time, that 20 years, travel sports existed at the start, but certainly the money that people were spending, not just on travel, but on private coaches, and if kids weren't able to get that private coaching, immediately getting pushed out. So I think those were some big changes, and just money. I mean, the private equity that was being pumped into youth sports at that point, the facilities, and what families were looking for. The other thing we talked a lot about at Little League was that, when we started in 1939, it was very community based, and it was geographically community based because you did everything sort of in a geographic area. And then as it evolved, the definition of community changed. So people's community wasn't necessarily geographic. It may have been where they went to church or where they went to school or whatever the friend group was. And so that's how they were defining community. And so when we said, okay, it's community based, you're going to play geographically, they were like, well, no, I do things with, my school group, or my church group, or my homeschool group. So that definition of what community means to people, I think, has changed over the course of the last 20 or 30 years.
I got a couple of follow-ups on both of those points. So you said a couple times, you said it in the beginning about kind of, you introduce a lot of variability as you kind of go, as you get scale and have, volunteers deploying your methods at the ground level. And the kind of the narrative or the conversation that hangs over youth sports today is around kind of the private equity and the for-profit side versus the kind of traditional community volunteer-based organizations. And I would love to understand maybe where you sit on kind of that spectrum, just from a personal viewpoint, because I think a lot of times the answer has been, well, more community volunteer-based organizations is good. And I think there's lots of merit there. But as you just kind of said, like the range and quality of those programs can vary wildly based on the individual that's kind of deploying it. So how do maybe you think about that in terms of where controlling and the compliance piece can help standardize those experiences, but at the same time recognizing that some of those volunteer community-based organizations expand accessibility to kids in areas that may not be able to afford to even pay $100 for a camp?
Yeah, I was just reading a piece by Steve Magnus talking about some of this the other day, and I think it all rests with the minds of parents. So I think about when I was a kid, right? Like my parents would drop me off wherever, and just ran, and they just knew I would come back, probably because nobody would take me. But so they knew I would come back. But parents now want to control, and understandably, because we've scared them, right? They want to control so much of every experience that their kid has. So it's a little bit fear-based. So when they're thinking of organizations that they want their kids to participate in, they're like, okay, are they doing background checks on the volunteers? Are the people that are going to be around my kid, do they share kind of my same insights, my same mindset? That they want to be able to control the people that their kids are around. Where think about the bad news bears, you just dropped your kid off, and whoever the coach was, you were fine with, right? And so it's such a, I talked about joysticking, like it's such a joystick model now. And so parents, when they're looking, I think are looking for organizations that are well-funded because they have all of those things. Like I used to tell this story at Little League. So where I lived in Indianapolis, there was no Little League where I lived. So my daughter didn't live in the boundaries of a Little League. And there were other youth baseball, softball programs for her to play in. But I was like, you know what? I want her to play Little League, and I'm going to go through the normal parent experience. So I looked, and I have the information, right? So I have a little behind the scenes. So I looked up the league closest to me, and I went on their website, which was defunct. I got on Facebook, which had information from the previous year, and I went through it all. And then I was like, all right, I'm going to just use my resources and like find the league president. So found it, emailed them, asked some questions, 2 weeks for a response. So it was just this really bad experience. And then I went to the organization that was not volunteer run, and I got a response immediately. And I was able to get answers to all of my questions. So from a parent who also is very, I mean, money for everyone is tight right now. So you want to make sure if you're spending money, you're getting what you paid for. And so I think that's a little bit of the downside of that, all this investment money that's coming in, that's building these amazing facilities. And parents also want that too, right? Like when I went to my local little league and I had my one daughter playing and my two little kids, and I needed to use the bathroom, or one of my toddler needed to use the bathroom, I was like, oh gosh, I got to walk completely across everything through fields to get to the concession stand and the bathroom. Where some of these, better funded programs, you have nice facilities, you have good concessions, the parking is good, the bathrooms are right there. And so as parents are looking for what their sort of return on their investment, that's desirable, that's interesting to them. And so I think they're gravitating towards those other organizations, and people know that. So those kind of that community experience with your kind of normal Norman Rockwell kind of little league experience, I think more parents are probably gravitating towards things that are a little more organized and a little more funded, as opposed to the traditional kind of like little league community-based approach. And I can't say that I blame parents for it. I think it really depends on the experience that they're looking for, what they want to get out of it. And some of it just comes from tradition, right? Like we know in Little League, a lot of people who, want to play Little League do so because they have fond memories of playing Little League as a child and that experience they had with their parents. So I think there somehow has to be a balance. I think we have to figure out how, it can be this experience that is still about the kids. That can still be a good experience where they can be safe and it can be organized, but it can also be affordable. And my hope is that some of these organizations that are taking money from investors are using that and not just to, and I know this isn't true, not just to line the pockets, but that's why they're investing, right? Because they know that there's money. And my hope is that it gets used in a way that's best for the kids and the families, and not for the return in the form of financial.
And the other part you said, that point about identity, I thought was really, I've never heard anybody say that, but it makes a ton of sense. It used to be the town, then it was the school or the church. Now I feel like, certainly with the internet in general in society, you have different identities regardless of where you live, but it almost seems like the club is now, the club team you play for or the facility you play out of is now another, kind of identity check in the list that further disintermediates the community-based organization.
Oh, 100%. I think like that's status, right? Like your kid plays at this club, or your kid works out at this gym or this facility. And that's part of the status of it. And that's how they identify. And we know that oftentimes, and I even would deal with this in Little League, is that, you join a team based on the social component for the parents. And so it's because after the games are over, you're all hanging out, you're stuck in wherever the middle of nowhere tournament is. And so you want to hang out with people that you like. So the kids are off running around the hotel. The parents are in the lobby, probably drinking Pepsi. So they're hanging out with, they want to be with other people that they like. And so they're joining these teams. And also it's all they do. That was one of the things when my daughter was playing travel ball. I'm like, first of all, we don't do travel sports until they're 12. Everything under 12 is community based. It's developmental. It's just them learning and having fun. And so when they hit 12, if it's something that they're interested in, then we'll look at something more competitive. That's my philosophy. But some of these programs wanted you to commit every weekend. And I always said, like, I love you, but I have a life as well. Like I need to be able to do something outside of your travel sport. So I think when parents are looking and investing that, and because they're investing so much money in it, right? So they've invested this money and they want to make sure that they're enjoying it as well. So it becomes their identity. They're all geared out in whatever their travel team gear is. And it's just what they do.
When you were at Little League, how do you get back to being able to compete with, these status symbols, kind of like travel or club ball? We were talking yesterday in our episode, a lot of youth sports are proposing some state legislation, California, Illinois, Massachusetts recently, to build these kind of youth sports state advisory boards. Do you think that could happen? Like, just from your time, be interested to hear what you think about all that.
Yeah, some of the best work that I was able to participate in at Little League is was able to participate in a group called the Million Coaches Challenge. It was Aspen Institute was involved, and Susan Crown Exchange funded it. And I got to work with some really smart people, much smarter. I always said I was the dumb jock in that group, but much smarter than I was, to kind of talk through some of those things. And we often talked about, this was specific to coaching, like what makes a good coach. What makes a good coach? What are the criteria that should be in place? And, is it different for recreational sports and travel sports and high school sports and Olympic sports? What makes a good coach? And, the challenge, especially as state, whether it's a city, a rec program, or a state and legislation, is then who then enforces it? Right. And so you can come up with legislation, and then it's deployed to all of these organizations, whether it's the volunteer-based organizations, high schools, but who is responsible then for enforcing that? And so I think the idea of establishing something like that is great, but what's the implementation look like? And how, again, because it's just from Little League, like it's a heavy lift enforcing, our rules and regulations, and how, if a league wasn't operating properly, there was some issue, and then like it being reported, and then how do you go, and then what's the penalty? What's the penalty if it's not enforced? Like we dealt with that with coaching. Okay, so this coach, so they don't meet the criteria, so then they can't coach anymore. But do you have a line of people waiting to coach? So I think that's it. In theory, I think it's great, but I would love to understand what the actual implementation will be, how it will be enforced. That those are all important things. We can certainly talk about things at a high level, but until you kind of talk about how it's deployed at the ground level, I just don't see it.
Yeah, it goes back to that variability at the ground level. We just covered a story in New Orleans a couple of weeks ago that I think the public rec department didn't background check like half of the coaches in the city, and then a bunch turned up as having criminal backgrounds. But the answer was, we were afraid we might find because we needed coaches. How do you think about at Little League? I think I had read you worked on like Sandlot style initiatives. Correct me if I'm wrong, but like, kids can kind of show up, join a team. It's kind of structured pickup, which is so good for kids, like that general kind of looser environment. I believe at one of the banana tournaments I read last year, like the kids don't come with a pre-assigned team. They come in and get assigned at the point of the tournament. Talk about that model, and if that might continue if you guys kind of go down the tournament route.
Yeah, that Sandlot model, again, is so good in theory, but going back to parents wanting to control everything, that's where we struggle. So at Little League, it was right before COVID, and we had this idea to have this program called Sandlot Sundays, or Sandlot Fun Days, I think it was. And I remember talking through that, and then sitting down, and immediately our Little League compliance mind said, okay, in order to do it, they have to do this, this, and this, and then you've defeated the whole Sandlot concept. And so that was a concept that came out, and then COVID hit. And so we really tried to lean a little more heavily into that as leagues were trying to come back to play, to try that Sandlot model. And our idea behind the Sandlot model was that you get kids who had never played to kind of show up during these unstructured days, and then we'd be able to try to get their information and connect them with a local league. The concept was good. I don't know that it really took off the way that we hoped that it would. The way that we are running our camps now is that it's more unstructured. Like they sign up, we put them on teams, they're exhibition style games. They just show up and play, because when you assign people earlier, parents want to get involved, they want to get organized, they want to do all the things that I talked about, that kind of creates that community where we just want kids to come and play and not think about all those other things. And so I think at this point that will continue to be our model, is it, being a little more unstructured, a little more Sandlot-esque, where it's a little more free play. And I'll go back to the term I keep using, which is unjoysticked. Is we want them to be able to, and I've seen that in sports as well, is that kids are actually they have less baseball and softball, just wherewithal and knowledge because they haven't been able to develop it on their own. They're constantly overcoached and told what to do, and they're not developing those natural instincts. Where in banana ball, we want it to be natural. We want them to figure it out, to kind of do things on the fly.
How much do you, if you know, kind of reading between the lines, how much do you think maybe parents writ large are responsible for some of the issues in youth sports? I mean, you keep mentioning like joystick and wanting to control the experience. You know, is it coming more from the privatization side and the companies and the clubs, or is it just the parents and the other side is there to fulfill that demand?
Yeah, I go back to the finger pointing of who's ultimately responsible. And at the end of the day, I think parents are ultimately responsible. We're the decision makers for what our kids participate in, and we do it with all of this outsider noise, everybody telling us what's best for our kids. But at the end of the day, it's our responsibility to make sure that the programming that we're signing our kids up for is what we're looking for, is in line with the experience that we want them to have. And understanding that depending on where you are, that may be limited. What activities your kids have access to could be very, very limited depending on where you live. But still, at Little League, if there wasn't a Little League in your community, you would play whatever was available, or you would have to drive to somewhere else. Not everybody can do that. So I think as consumers, it is parents' responsibility, but as organizers and providers, we need to make sure we're also listening to parents and we're listening to the data and we're providing programming that's best for kids. It goes back to, we're doing things this way because that's easy and that's the way that we've always done it. When you think about especially baseball and softball programming and you look at T-ball, right? T-ball is the easiest program to run. In Little League, there was no tournament component. You could put a bunch of kids on the team and they just ran around. So that was the program that our leagues would pay the least amount of attention to. And coming from us, we were like, that's the program you need to pay the most amount of attention to. That's where you make kids fall in love with the game. That's where kids, after 1 year, if they don't have a good experience or they didn't have a fun coach, they're never playing again. So in kind of flipping the switch, instead of putting all of our focus on 11s and 12s and this competitive component, focus back on the younger kids, make access, an easy access point, make it fun, and don't do it the way you've always done it just because that's the easy thing to do. So think about it differently. Like traditional T-ball, right? So I'll just use the Little League model. So you sign up. If you're in the Midwest where my kids were, you start practices in like March. It might still be snowing. Who knows if you're really going to get some practice in, or it's going to rain most of the time. And then they start games in April, and you're going to try to get, some games in April and May before the Little League season essentially ends because everybody gets ready for tournament. So it's the worst time of the year to play. They're just powering it through. But if they really switched it and said, we're going to prioritize, and instead of having this like weird practice and game model, maybe if it's more camp style, maybe kids show up and it's, a 30-minute camp, and then we just play a 30-minute game instead of putting everybody onto teams. But then the wild card there is like every parent wants to have their kid in that T-ball uniform so they can do the social media post and it's all cute. Like, so there's all of those kind of factors, those variables that, people are wanting different things. So it's going to take a collective movement from everybody to, I think, just come back and say, look, we're going to go back to prioritizing what's best for the kids, not what's best for my posting, not what's best for, me socially as an adult. I'm an adult. I can figure out my own social stuff. So it's this movement, this, again, deprogramming of everybody coming back to what's the best experience for our kids? How will they best develop? What's the best sports-based youth programming for them? And where are they having fun?
So it seems like, obviously the goals of Banana Ball for the youth anyway is to promote, accessibility, fun, joy, all that stuff. But it seems like a goal is also to reshape baseball culture in a way.
I think youth sports culture. I think so. So Banana Ball is doing this with baseball, right? what's to say it can't be done in other sports? And maybe not exactly the same way, but just like the difference. Like, and a lot of what has made banana ball different than traditional baseball is we've sped up the game, right? Like we've made it. There's a 2-hour time limit. We've sped up the game. We've eliminated some of the downtime. Other sports move a little bit faster, but like think about basketball, for example. Like when there's 2 minutes left in a basketball game and it's a close score, that 2 minutes is actually now 30 minutes, right? And like.
We were just talking the fourth quarter.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
We've actually written in the newsletter too, when I think Jesse's video first came out, hey, if the Bananas get this right, expect this to be copied in other sports, whatever model they come up with. So last one for me. Obviously, a lot of constraints, a lot of issues, a lot of challenges in youth sports, which were well laid out here. 3 to 5 years down the road, in an ideal world, what would perfect look like for you with kind of youth level banana ball or just youth sports in general?
I think 3 to 5 years is aggressive for dynamic change. I think it's going to take a shift, and I hoped that we would see some of that shift coming out of COVID. And we talked about that in Little League, where maybe people will come back to community-based sports, and sort of the opposite happened, because community-based sports, especially volunteer organizations, were really focused on the restrictions and on complying with the restrictions, where travel ball was like, we're just going to keep going and nobody's going to stop us. And so while we thought there would kind of be this return to community-based, the opposite sort of happened. And so I think our goal, in looking at 3 to 5 years, we're going to continue to prioritize our main thing, which is growing the game of banana ball and determining kind of what the tentacles of that look like. And I think youth programming will be one of them. What I would eventually love to see happen, and I think it's possible, I don't know that it'll be in 3 to 5 years, is that, we do have a banana ball youth league. And like I talked about earlier, the struggle for that will be controlling that experience. And it may have to shift a little bit from what we do now, which is, we make sure that players are a part of that. If we have a youth league, obviously we're not going to have, players at all of the games, but at least the sport of banana ball is played more widely. And so the kids are, we're our 10, our 11 rules that, I don't know that we can implement all of them because we probably can't do a fan challenge in youth sports, but that
the parents would love that.
Yes. Yeah.
Let us catch the outs.
Yes. Fan caught foul balls. Can you imagine dads trying to catch the foul balls of the other team? We're going to probably need to have some like really great insurance on those leagues for the diving catches that the dads are going to try to do. But that hopefully we can take the existing rules of our game and kind of shape those to be more adequate for a youth game. And then just start to pilot some of those things and figure out what works and figure out if there's an interest. And, it may not be a sport for everybody, but for those kids that are looking for something different, that it's an option, because we just want kids to play. And I often think about, in youth sports in particular, it's not the really young kids. It's not kind of the 8 and 9. It's that, like, once they hit 12 and 13 and they don't want to play in high school, because I think high school sports continue to deteriorate. And so they don't have an option to play in high school. They're no longer, they're not playing travel because either they don't want to travel every weekend, or they can, like, what are those kids doing? And is Little League an option? Maybe. We know that's we weren't, whether it was through the rules and regulations, that wasn't something that we were hitting. But one of the wild cards I always threw out at Little League was like, what if we had a teenage teenage wiffle ball division? What if the kids could just go play wiffle ball? Because one of the, like, and we would even see this at the Little League World Series and our regional tournaments. The best game that was being played was the wiffle ball game on the wiffle ball field. We had a wiffle ball field at the Little League Baseball World Series. And so what if there was an organized way for those sort of like 12, 13, 14-year-olds? And I think that's a great place for banana ball to be, because these little kids, the 9 and 10s, while they're super cute trying trick plays, they still can barely catch a ball. They're still struggling with coordination, right? And so the trick plays are few and far between, except for the really advanced kids. But for those kids that maybe played little league or maybe played, and don't want to play high school, but still are interested. I mean, I think of it as like me when I finished playing and was just playing old lady softball. Like what's an option for those kids that still want to continue to play, but don't want to deal with the crazy competitiveness? And I think that's a market where there's a need. And I feel like that might be an option for Banana Ball.
What do you guys look at for softball, Banana Ball? I mean, obviously coming from, you had kids that played, you played yourself. How do you look at softball and maybe piloting something like that with Banana Ball?
Yeah, I've actually gotten that question a lot, and we have some softball players that do now play Banana Ball. Megan Wiggins was a softball player. Ashton Lansdale play our sport now, and so I think softball, as it is now, on the normal sort of 60-foot base paths is it's difficult to implement our game on a small field like that because it's hard to do trick plays when the game like softball moves so quickly. And so I think, whether it's, you think about maybe making the field a little bit bigger, maybe not to a 60-90 necessarily, but, one of the other intermediate size fields, it could be something for softball. But we know that those softball players are also phenomenal athletes and could probably rip out some backflip catches and, some tornado catches and some of those things as well. So I don't think it's off the table. I think that with the traditional softball, it's just the field difference. It's going to be hard to kind of go between the legs on a slapper, lefty slapper, who's halfway down the base path by the time they hit the ball.
Last one from me. Banana Ball in general, you may have a very unique opportunity depending on what happens with a potential MLB lockout next year. How do you guys think about that? From the big dogs all the way down to like the youth league.
Yeah, I think how we think about it is there may be a lot of empty stadiums that are interested in having Banana Ball being played in that.
There's your facility problem solved.
Yeah, so that may be an option. And athlete wise, so we're at 6 teams right now. We don't have any plans to expand for 2027. This is the first year that we actually have a league with 6 teams, and right now we have our developmental team in house. Our developmental team is called the Visitors. And so kind of they're in and trying to figure out what Banana Ball is and allowing us to kind of take a look at them and seeing if they're a good fit. But, it's to be a banana baller, the baseball has to be good, right? Jesse always said, if the baseball's not good, we don't have a foundation. So they have to be able to play the game. But I think what people don't realize is there's so much more that goes into these athletes being successful. And the fans first mentality, the engagement mentality that our players have is something that probably a lot of professional athletes would have a hard time with. So, whether anybody realizes or not, these players show up early in the morning on game days and they are interacting and engaging with fans almost the whole time. So the guys that aren't pitching, that aren't playing that day, they're in the stands, they're fighting for their lives, engaging with fans. And so I think that's what makes us different from some of those other professional sports who are very, very protective of the access to their athletes, where we've sort of, flipped the script on that and said that, our athletes are going to go out and engage. And so, certainly if there's some Major League Baseball players that think they could cut it in Banana Ball, we'd love to hear from them. But it takes a very special and amazing human to be involved in Banana Ball. It's not for everybody.
Anything else, Kyle?
That was great.
Yeah. Thank you so much,
Nina. By the way,
really
the sound behind you, I know that people always accuse the Masters of like piping in like bird noises. And like you guys are so on brand with the kids laughing and having fun that I'm almost like, this sounds like a recording.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Did I hear 2 balls hit the warehouse, by the way?
Yes. So this building that I'm in right now, so it's in the outfield of Grayson Stadium, and it was like built as a temporary building, I don't know, like 4 years ago. And then they had to redo it. So on top of it during games is fan seating. And so this is where our operations office is. I'm in I'll bring the camera over and show you our bat wall in a second. But this is where our equipment manager, who previously worked for the Braves, he was the home clubby and then the visiting clubby, and now he works for us. But he's built this phenomenal I'll have to pick up my whole computer. But he's built this phenomenal bat wall over here where everybody's bats are.
Wow. It's very organized in the Banana Ball warehouse.
Oh, look at that.
Great job. Wow.
Yeah, so there's a bat rack for every player right there that he's developed. But yeah, this was before we built our new locker room. This was the operations office and the locker room for 2 of the teams. We now have a nice locker room for them. But yeah, so this is just like a temporary building. So anytime there's a home run hit, it bounces off of this metal building. So that's what you were hearing.
Perfectly on brand.
Yeah. I love that. Now, Nina, thank you so much. And we even got a little tour for the people, too, of the behind the scenes of the Banana Ball warehouse there and everything down in Grayson Stadium. So, Nina, we really appreciate it. Good luck with everything. Keep us in mind when you guys are doing more camps, doing more pop-ups. That youth league is starting to get the wheels turning a little bit.
If you guys get into PA, New Jersey, like my boys are 10 and 7, they're in. Please, like they're in. I'll pay whatever. They're
I love
in.
it.
Yeah. So thank you so much for coming on. We really, really appreciate it.
Thanks for having me. It was a blast.